Well, g'day flatties and globe defenders, it's Critical Thing from Down Under. Underlit clouds are one of the most obvious signs that we live on a globe. But flat earthers seem to be the only ones that don't understand how clouds can get lit underneath. And in fact, they deny that it ever happens, even though this is obvious. Now, we are told to trust our senses by the flat earthers, but when our senses say the clouds are lit underneath, we are not to trust our senses, because that would mean the earth is not flat, because such a thing is impossible on a flat earth. Well, go figure. Well, I'm going to trust my senses, and I'm going to say that the sun shines on the underneath the clouds, not only because it looks like that, but because the evidence supports it, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in this video. These clouds are obviously lit underneath. Now that's obvious to everyone except flat earthers. A flat earther looks at this and they say, this is impossible on a flat earth, therefore I have to make up some kind of explanation, no matter how crazy or dishonest, because after all the earth must be flat, and even though you trust your senses, because the earth must be flat, this image is either fake or there's another ridiculous explanation. Now, flat earthers will in fact say things that are either incredibly stupid or just plain dishonest. There's only one way you can come to some of these conclusions. Now, let's take an example from Mr. Thrive and Survive. Now, Rich talks with an authoritative voice, but just because he's so sure of himself does not mean that he is right. And this is an example of the kind of thing that it's either completely stupid or just plain dishonest.
Like Bob the Science Guy did when he made the erroneous claim that clouds from mountain peaks or shadows from mountain peaks are underneath the clouds, because he had no idea how perspective worked.
Right. Now, Bob never actually made such a claim, but Mr. Thrive and Survive says that he did. But Bob's claim was that this picture shows clouds lit underneath. Not that clouds are always lit underneath by mountains. Yes, a mountain can poke through the clouds, but I have to ask you, Bob never said anything about this. Bob never said this could not happen. What Bob said was, in this picture, the sun is lighting up the bottom of the clouds. Now, this whole thing about mountains poking up through the clouds and casting shadows is a straw man. It's a straw man created by p-brane so that he can deflect from the obvious images where the sun shines on the underneath of the clouds. Now, has anybody ever taken a picture from underneath the cloud that shows a shadow caused by a mountain poking through the clouds? I don't think so. This picture on the left, we don't see what it looks like underneath, and I've never seen shadows cast onto the top of clouds from underneath the clouds. But anyway, let's look now. I took a time-lapse movie this morning. Now, if you watch there, we'll go through quickly. There's something very interesting about this. Now, did you see it? I'll play it again and I'll stop it around about the right time. Right there. There's the sun shining on the bottom of the clouds. Now, I'm going to play that bit again, just so that you can see it. Can you see that there's also a bit of a searchlight effect? Now I'm going to slow this down a bit so that you can see a little bit easier. Now you notice that the clouds at a lower altitude are moving from left to right, and the clouds at the higher altitude are travelling more in an easterly direction. This is important when you come to this bit here. Now you see that the shadow sweeps from left to right. So that's one clue that it's the clouds, the lower altitude clouds, that are causing the shadows. Now there's another clue, and if you look again, you'll see that the shadow sweeps in brightness from far away to near. So this can only happen with the sun having an obstruction that's lower. You can't get that effect if the sun were casting a shadow on the top of the clouds. If the sun were coming closer, if there was a mountain poking through that clouds, the shadows would retreat towards the east. And you notice that these shadows are retreating towards the west. So therefore, the simple mechanics of light and shadows tells us that these shadows are being cast underneath. Now p-brane and Mr. Thrive and Survive like to tell us that these shadows can only appear like this because there's a mountain poking through the clouds. Well, I have some breaking news for you guys. There's no mountains in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And so where's the mountains? These shadows are not caused by mountains. So you cannot say that every shadow you see like this is caused by a mountain poking through the clouds, because clouds can also cause these shadows, is the case here. Now here's another picture taken on a different day, and it's this beautiful sun shining on the bottom of the clouds. Here's another picture taken on another day, about I don't know, a year or two ago. So you notice that some clouds are in darkness and some clouds are lit underneath. So if the sun were above the clouds, you could not actually see that picture. It would not look like that. And here's another example. You see the clouds higher in the sky. They're normal white colour because they're high, but the lower clouds are lit underneath. Try to get that to happen on a flat earth. Draw me a diagram, Gary. Draw us a diagram to show how this can happen. And here's another one. Now, where's Wally did a video on this particular event. Well, I happened to be out taking a photograph from a different location because I was driving in my car and I tried to quickly get out of my car, and there was a storm clouds there, so they're nice and thick, so the sun can't actually shine through them. So, but there you go, they're being lit underneath. Now here's a couple of shots I took this morning while I was taking the time-lapse photography with my P900. I've taken some photos with my P1000, and you can see a little bit more clearly that patch of sunlight shining underneath the clouds. Now I've drawn some perspective lines on one of these photos, and you'll see here. Now these are just perspective lines, Gary. Perspective lines form a vanishing point when you trace them back. So these lines are following the shadows back to the sun. They will go back to the sun. If you think that they won't go back to the sun, well then you're going to have to explain where they will go. And this is a couple of minutes before sunrise and the sun is still below the horizon. So how can that be on a flat earth? So just to reiterate, there's shadows cast on the clouds above. There's no mountains. The shadows are cast underneath, and the direction that the shadows travel is proof of the angles involved. If the shadows were being cast from the top, then the light and dark portions would move in different directions, and the shadows would just move differently. So that's why, flatties, we can say that the sun shines underneath the clouds only pre-dawn or post-sunset, and that's why the earth cannot be flat.